have a special guest again. It's the only one owner of the podcast Malicious Live. For those who are listening podcast a lot, I think you know his podcast. So here he is, Ran Levi.
Hello, everybody.
And yeah, today I also have interesting questions. And at the end, you guys probably know how it goes. If at the end you guys have questions, you can ask him. So yeah, let's just go with it and let's go to the first question. If you remember, when was your very first hack?
Well, really, I'm not a hacker by trade. I'm an engineer. I started as an electronics engineer, and then I became a software developer after a while. Never in cybersecurity, really. Cybersecurity was more of a passion of mine as a writer. Uh, Aside from being a podcaster, I'm also an author. I wrote 3 books. My third book was about the history of cybersecurity, which kind
Interesting.
of naturally led to the podcast, to the Malicious Life podcast, which is about the history of cybersecurity. So I'm not a hacker in the real, in the real sense of the word. Although I did, in my youth, as a kind of, more for fun. I did some, hacking into, let's say, not very modest websites, to put it in a mild manner. Mainly to see, like many young people, just to see how it works and how you can crack passwords and what does it mean to hack a website and get to see, all the content that is behind password, which is password protected. Although when I grew up, I mainly focused on electronics and software, not on so much on cybersecurity. But of course, over time, I've been writing about many types of malware, so I did try to test as many of them as I could. Not a lot of them, not a lot that I could test over time, because I don't have the real setups for these kinds of things. But I did try out some malware and penetration testing tools just to get a feel of how the tools work. But there are most hackers are much more professional than I am. I admit.
Well, thank you for the answer. And I was always thinking that you also were a hacker because your stories on the podcast always go about hacking. So yeah,
Yeah, actually, I mean, hacking is an amazing, from a point of view of a writer, cybersecurity is an amazing topic to write about
yeah,
because it's partly technical and partly human centric. I mean, the stories and the drama and what drives the people is is very interesting to me. And then, of course, there is also the technological side, which is also very interesting. So mostly I do the reporting and writing on cybersecurity, and I leave the actual, cybersecurity work to the guys who are, professionals in the field.
well, at least your stories are always nice to hear. And yeah, I think
Thank you.
I don't speak for my own, but I think many people who are watching also love to listen to Malicious Life for those who are listening podcasts. So
Thank
thank
you.
you for the stories. For my second question, you already mentioned that you are not a real hacker in the sentence of hacker. But yeah, did you go to college for learning writing books or podcasts perhaps, or did you mostly just learn everything watching YouTube or reading books or yeah?
When it comes to podcasting, and when I started podcasting really early, it was sometime in 2007, early 2007. So podcasting really was just starting in 2004, 2005. So it was really, really early, even before we had actual podcasting apps, for people to actually use phones to hear them. We used to hear podcasts via MP3
Oh God.
players. So there was really nowhere to learn how to actually do podcasting. So I kind of learned it by trial and error most of the time, and I took a lot of ideas and a lot of techniques from actual books, and because I my earlier hobby was as an author, naturally I started creating narrative podcasts based around real stories that I wrote. And only then did I actually start to understand how to turn them into, audio productions. And I learned a lot from listening to American podcasts, mainly Radio Lab, This American Life, the classics that were already present back in the late 2000s. And when it came to cybersecurity in particular, I started. I mean, I had a great background in software development, in hardware development, so it was very easy to me to just open. Uh, there weren't even many YouTube videos back then, but mostly reading books, articles, here and there, a few movies, lots of in-depth reading code just to see how the actual worms and viruses actually worked. So it was very self-learning experience. But luckily, I'm a great self-learner. I learned a lot of stuff by myself even since I was a kid. So it was pretty easy for me, happily.
Yeah, that we can see with the books behind you that you love learning on your own. But
Yeah, I've been actually. I mean, even as a kid, I was very interested in technology and science, and I grew up in the '80s in Israel, and of course back then no internet, nowhere to read to get information except going to the library. Maybe our listeners, viewers, remember back when the '80s and '90s we had libraries of books that you would go to and actually pick a book to bring home. You couldn't actually take it with you online. So as a kid, I used to go to the library, and I would have this kind of a notebook that I brought with me. So I would sit for hours in the library. The librarians were probably very amazed for the nerdy kid who comes with a notebook.
they probably
And
say,
open
"Oh,
up.
there he is again. Hey, hello."
Exactly. I used to open encyclopedias. We had encyclopedias back then, huge books, and then just started reading lots of interesting stuff from astronomy to physics to chemistry. I was so fascinated with so many topics of science, and that experience growing up and with nobody to teach you anything taught me how to basically learn by myself. And later on, I discovered that I learn best by teaching others. So even now, today, when I learn something new, I try to make it into an article or a blog post or a podcast, something which will let me explain what I'm learning while I'm learning it. It's a great technique that worked fantastically for me.
Well, it's great that that is the way for you that works for you. And yeah, again, I think many people learn a lot for listening to you and reading your post. So keep going on that way. It's really fantastic. Uh,
Yeah, most of what I'm doing in terms of podcasting is walking on the thin line between telling a good story and teaching important ideas, of explaining important ideas. I very much enjoy working on that line because just telling interesting stories is not very challenging for me, because lots of people can and do make create great stories. The challenge, I think, for me as a writer, as a podcaster, is to create stories on topics which are very hard to communicate. For example, cybersecurity. Sometimes when you want to write a good story about a malware or a hack or a breach or whatever, you have to explain to the audience some really heavy technical ideas. And that's, I think, the beautiful challenge that I love
Podcast.
to deal with, because I could write. I mean, writing human stories and dramas is very technical for me. It's not a very big challenge. I could probably write, interesting stories on any topic. But then you have to make it work, and also for people to understand how, how what kind of vulnerability the hacker was exploiting, or what kind of tools they were using, which is not something that you would find in many,
Podcast.
human dramas, in movies or whatever. They usually gloss over those complicated ideas. But that's the kind of challenges that I specifically enjoy.
Well, it's really an interesting story, and yeah, it's nice that that is your inspiration and your motivation to keep going. Yeah, I probably next week, the 3rd of March, I have a talk with probably your opposite podcaster, the one from Darknet Diaries.
Jack Resider.
Yeah, I
Oh
thought,
yeah, he's amazing. He is amazing.
yeah,
I've told him.
I will have a talk with him 3 March. But do you work with him together sometimes, or do you have contact? Because yeah,
Yes, we did some cross promotion of our podcasts. I aired 2 of his episodes. He aired 2 of my episodes, and it's beneficial. I mean, our audiences are very similar in
yeah,
both in taste and what they are looking for in the podcasts they consume. So it was very natural for us to work together for mutual benefit. And he's a great guy. I mean, you can when you listen to his podcast, he knows how to tell great stories, and he knows what he's talking about. So I love Darknet Diaries personally.
yeah. Always when I listen to Malicious Live and Dark Diaries, I always think in the background, oh, they are probably working together, or at least they know each other, because yeah, similar stories, similar perspective. Yeah, so yeah, that's why my
Not
question.
many, there are not many podcasts like Darknet Diaries and Malicious Life. It's something which is rather complicated. I mean, writing good narrative stories about cybersecurity and technology in general, I'm happy to say that it's not something that lots of podcasters can do. And I'm very
Yeah,
fortunate to have on my team. We have a team that produces
yeah,
Malicious Life. On my team, I've got myself and Nate Nilsson, my senior producer, who also takes part in the writing of the episode sometimes, and the sound designer Ben Or. And these people are, all of us are professional, and I'm very lucky to have a great professional team of people who can really work hard to transform a very complicated story, a very complicated idea, into something engaging. I think there are only 3 or 4 podcasts in the entire world in English that I know of which try to do what me and Jack Resider are trying to do.
yeah. You two guys are really doing an amazing job. Please keep continue, of course. And
We will.
yeah, but I always am wondering when I'm listening to Malicious Live or Darknet Diaries, how can those guys come up with those stories? Yeah, are they infiltrating the CSA or something? How do they know those stories, and how can they find someone who is willing to talk publicly about it? Because I have heard some stories on those podcasts that I think, well, if the NSA is going to listen to this, they probably going OSINT to do some research about the guy who's telling all this information in public. So yeah, how do you guys come with
Yeah,
it?
yeah. It's the answer might surprise you. It's quite easy to get the information. The information, most of it, almost all of the information we give in Malicious Life, and I'm guessing that this might be a similar answer if you ask Jack. Most of it is publicly available. People are, People are writing a lot of stuff in blogs and social media and academic articles. It's just that researching is a skill. It's not something that everybody knows immediately how to do. It takes a while to learn how to research a topic and how to find those hidden nuggets of information, and even more importantly, I think, tie them up together and fact check them, because lots of
Yeah.
the information you get is false or exaggerated. So you have to fact check and find all the different angles and different people who wrote about stuff. And then lots of the material is very, very technical. So to create an episode, the first challenge is just making the research. And when I first started, I started, as I said, as an author, and my first book, it took me, I think, 6 years to write that first book.
Whoa.
Mostly because I didn't know yet how to do great research. And I spent so much time on dead ends and writing stuff and then discovering that it's wrong and it's the sources weren't correct. And I had to delete lots of stuff. And of course, taking wrong routes and writing about stuff which is not related to the ideas that I was trying to convey. And then I have to delete lots of stuff. So it took me a long time, that first book, but it was a great learning experience. Now we can produce a new episode once every 2 weeks. And only the research part of the episodes can take anywhere between 40 to 100 hours for each episode. I'm not talking even about the actual writing yet, just the research. And then having someone to actually be a guest in the show, that's also a challenge. Most people who were actually involved in the stories, the hackers or the actual people, I can find them most of the time. I can contact them. I reach out to them. Many of them won't agree to be interviewed. So many times I try to get the researchers from, the defensive side of the operations. But sometimes I get lucky and listeners send in ideas and even send in full stories and, being interviewed. Once the podcast got a bit successful and listeners started to arrive in their thousands, I'm getting lots of ideas. So it's not a real difficulty anymore getting ideas. No, not that it ever was. Cybersecurity has so many great stories. You just have to, open up Wikipedia randomly, start reading articles, and then you come across this incident kind of feels interesting, and then you dive deep and you find lots of interesting stuff.
Yeah, I can imagine that the hackers, they don't want to come, of course, because if they come, perhaps they think, is this a trap? Perhaps if I go, then the CIA will wait there for me, and once I enter the room, oh shit, I will be catched. Perhaps they have that kind of idea.
Suspicion.
Yeah.
Suspicion. Many of them, by the way, are people who did what they did in earlier periods of their lives when they were younger people, and they no longer want to be associated with the stuff that they did. Just to give you an example, back in the early 2000s, there was a computer worm called, I think its name was Sasser. It was a worm that spread very fast around the world. It infected Windows computers, and I actually got it myself. It got into computers without any user intervention. So I think it was one Saturday morning or whatever. I opened my PC. There was an alert on the screen said you got 60 seconds before the computer shuts down. And I had 60 seconds to figure out what happened before the computer shut down. And I restarted again 60 seconds, again trying, very frantically to understand what's going on. Why is it shutting down? Again, it took me like, I think, half an hour of restarting again. And I cursed the virus author. I said many bad names. I won't repeat them, but I was very upset. And
I think
then when
half
I
of the
started
words.
writing my book, I actually found out who was that guy that wrote Sasser, because he was caught eventually. And I approached him. I found out some detective work on the internet. I found out who he was, and I approached him. He was by then he was out of jail. He spent some time in jail, and he was out of jail. He was already reformed and working in a software company, and he wasn't very thrilled to talk about what he did. But once he heard that I myself was damaged by the worm, I think it kind of maybe changed his outlook a bit. Maybe because he felt felt a bit sorry for what he did. I don't know. And he agreed to talk to me, but it's very rare. I think I've got only 4 or 5 people who over the years to actually tell me about their dark side work. It's not an easy thing.
No, I can totally imagine that it is heavy for them to talk publicly about what they did when they were young, and it still haunts them every day. It's nice that you guys do so much research to verify your sources, and it's nice. And it's also a little bit of a 40 hours. That's 100 hours. That's really a lot of time that you spent. But you of course need it. You don't want to publish fake news.
Exactly, because we're talking in the podcast. Most of our listeners are cybersecurity professionals. I can't afford to say something which is blatantly wrong. I can sometimes I can speculate if I have no real information, but then I have to say this is a speculation. But when you're talking to people who really know their things and they know what they're talking about, you can't invent stuff, and you can't if I make a mistake, immediately I'll get tens of comments saying, this is wrong, this is not right. And this is something that me and the team, we take very, very seriously, the research.
Yeah, it's really great that you do so much research. I think I can talk for everyone to say that, keep going the research, and we all love to listen. Let's go to the follow-up question. We started this entire story by the question, did you go to college? So the next question is, when did you knew that you want to start in the InfoSec board as podcasting? So when was the switch in your head like, okay, now I'm going to make a podcast about infosecurity?
I actually wanted to create a podcast about cybersecurity, almost I think from when I started podcasting in general. I'm in Israel. My first podcast was about computer games back in 2007. A few months after that, I started another podcast called Making History in Hebrew, about the history of science and technology. And it grew in Israel. It became very popular. Until now, it is one of the most popular podcasts in Israel. But even back then, I knew that I wanted to write about cybersecurity because, as I said, it's a very interesting topic to write about, both the human drama and the technological aspects of it. But it was too hard for me as back then I was still an engineer. I was working for a military manufacturer in Israel. So all the things that I did in podcasting were, only late nights and weekends. After the kids were asleep, that's when I would start actually working on the podcast. And it was too much. I couldn't create 2 podcasts at the same time. But sometime in 2014 or 2015, I left my day job as an engineer. I raised some money, and together with another founder, we created PI Media, which is a podcast production company. We built a team of people, and once you work full-time job and you've got a team of professionals who really know how to help you and how to, offload some of the work, then I could really start, thinking really about how can I create such a podcast. And then there was a bit of luck because back then, I think it was 2016 or something like that, we were approached, the production company was approached by Cybereason, which is a cybersecurity company, I would say partly Israeli, partly American. The headquarters is in the United States, but the founders are Israeli. And they knew what I was doing as a podcaster in Making History, the Israeli podcast. And they approached us with an idea: why won't you create a cybersecurity podcast in English for international audience? And I was thrilled, but I must admit that at the beginning I was kind of skeptical because my English wasn't that good. I read and write English fantastic from an early age, but speaking English was not something I was used to doing on my day-to-day job. Even though sometimes you'd have occasionally you could talk to somebody when you're working, but it was not on a daily basis, and my accent was too Israeli. I think it was very, very heavily, the accent was too heavy, I think, for most American audiences, for example. And I decided that if I really wanted to try to create a podcast for international audience, I should try to fix that. So I spent, I think it was almost half a year of practicing my English, studying, taking online courses and learning how to improve your accent. Lots of, speaking to my computer monitor, trying, tongue twisters and stuff. And within a few months, my accent improved dramatically, I'm happy to say. So I felt confident that now I can actually communicate with international audiences and not feel uncomfortable with my voice. So we started a podcast, and I'm happy to say that, we're probably in the right time, in the right place. Uh, Almost immediately after we started, we already had our first few hundred listeners. And within a year or two, we were up to 20, 30,000 listeners per episode, which is, if you're talking about a niche topic like cybersecurity, it's a great result. I would never think that it could be such a great success. It took a lot of work, but it's an amazing experience.
Well, yeah. If I hear you talking now, I will never think that you had problems with your English. But yeah, it sounds clear
Actually,
and good to me. But
if you would ask me like 4 or 5 years ago, is it possible to improve your accent? Remember, I'm 45 years old, and from my experience, people who learn a language, not native speakers, they always have bad accents. I know almost nobody who learned English not as a mother tongue with and has a good accent. So I felt that it's hopeless. But then I met somebody who told me, no, you're wrong. Even at the relatively old age, you can still improve your accent. You just need to know what to improve. It's not only that you have to speak the language a lot. It's also working with a coach who knows what's wrong with your accent and gives you the correct exercises. And once I figured that out, it was a couple of months, 3 4 months, and then my accent improved dramatically.
Perhaps I need to do the same course.
It's a lot of work.
Yeah,
By
yeah,
the
I know.
way, and something very interesting that I learned over the years as well is that sometimes having an accent is good, is not bad. It's very interesting because I thought that an accent is a disadvantage because I listen to American podcasts and I hear their natural way of speaking, and I was always felt that something is wrong with me. But then I read an interview, a very interesting interview with Arnold Schwarzenegger, the movie actor, and he said in the interview something very interesting that kind of caught me by surprise. He said that he became American citizen sometimes in the early 80s, I think,
Yeah.
and 40 years later, he says he doesn't have much accent anymore. He's Austrian by origin,
Yeah, yeah.
and everybody knows he has a very very
Heavy voice.
a very heavy German Austrian accent, but apparently most of it is made up now.
Yeah,
He
it's
or
true.
not made up. He tries to emphasize his accent because that's his how would we put it? That's his trademark.
Yeah,
If I
he's
would
marketing.
exactly, if I would say I am Arnold Schwarzenegger, everybody knows just by the accent who are we talking about. That's his trademark. So once I learned that, it kind of changed my way of thinking. Now, sometimes I deliberately insert words with an Israeli accent. For example, if I say names, Arabic names, which are sometimes difficult for native English speakers to pronounce, like Muhammad, the ha sound, which is, if I'm not mistaken, very common in the Netherlands, right? The ha sound. Am I correct?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I have.
Exactly. And in American English, it's not common. So the Americans can't say Muhammad. They say Muhammad. And I pronounce it Muhammad just so they notice that I'm not a native English speaker. by design.
Well,
I think
perhaps
it's cute.
perhaps I need to make my own commercial to with my own accent, Dutch, combine it with English. That's my
Exactly.
that's my commercial. No, but yeah, thank you for the answer. Yeah, it was interesting to hear, and yeah, let's go to the next question. Yeah, my next question was supposed to be: do you still spend time on learning new hacking skills? But you already mentioned you do not do active hacking. So let's jump to the next one. Yeah, how does it feel to have a podcast? And yeah, it's quite a successful podcast. So how does that feel? And yeah, do you also have days that you walk on the street and people say, hey, you are from Malicious Life. Hey, or yeah,
Actually, I mean, it's a fantastic experience. First of all, my podcast in Israel, the original podcast called Making History, became a success sometime in 2010, which is like 10, 11 years ago. And by that time, I was already 35 years old, engineer, very, unknown, a regular engineer working in a cubicle. Nobody knew who I was. And I had people started knowing my voice. They never saw my face because podcasting. So I was relatively unknown, but when I would open my mouth to speak, then people would start turning heads around. I would say that on the train, and sometimes at work I would say something and somebody would pop their heads from a cubicle, like that sounds familiar. But it took some time for people to actually recognize me on the street. It happens every once in a while. And of course, outside of Israel, nobody knew who I was completely. And with Malicious Life being a bit of a success nowadays, I'm starting to actually people start to talk to me and send me, comments and letters and emails from lots of places around the world. It's such a great experience. I mean, I'm talking to you. You're from the Netherlands. Last live event that we had a live episode a few months back. We had listeners from India, from Norway, from Great Britain, of course, many, many, many listeners in the United States. It's so much fun. I mean, we live in an amazing time to be able
Uh,
to.
with the COVID, it's not that amazing.
No, I mean even before COVID,
Yeah,
because
yeah.
when you're creating a podcast in English, it goes global. It's mainly, of course, in the United States. Most of the listeners are in the United States,
Yeah.
but we've got thousands of listeners all over the world. Even places which I would never dream to have listeners in, like Iran, Iraq, Syria, places that I could never probably visit uh, as a citizen, go travel because I'm from Israel, but we still have listeners there. And it's an amazing experience. It really feels as if, the world has become one global village, and I can have friends and colleagues from all around the world. And I mean, for me personally, that's something that I find so much fun. That just by itself, that's a great reason to create a podcast.
Yeah, it's really amazing, of course, that you have listeners everywhere, and yeah, that's also the beauty of podcasting. That yeah, they just download an application on phone, and they are going to work, and when they are traveling to work, yeah, they just put the headset on, or the earphones, or the AirPods,
Yeah,
and yeah,
it's a very intimate experience when you're listening to a podcast. I mean, I've been listening to a podcast for like 15 years or whatever. When you're listening to a podcast, there's very real intimacy between the listener and the host, because you both share the same passions. I mean, I'm very passionate about cybersecurity, and think people can easily hear that in my voice. I like the topic, and when you're talking to someone and you both passionate about the same topic, that's a very emotional bond which is created, even though it's only one way. But that's the beauty of podcasting. People feel what I'm feeling, and they know that I love what they love too. So it's so powerful. It's amazing.
yeah. Well, thank you for answering that question, and thank you, of course, for the hard work. Yeah, I mostly listen to your podcast when I'm going to work. So yeah, I'm in a train, and yeah, best time to listen to some new things that's happening in the infosecurity field. So yeah, uh,
Exactly.
yeah. For my next question, yeah, I already asked you at the beginning, so let me jump to the next one. Uh, I don't know if you are allowed to share this with us, but um, are there any big stories coming soon that you are already preparing now and that you may can talk a little bit about, or yeah, if that's is
Mm,
allowed?
it's a tough question. I don't know if I want to share the great ideas, because then Jack Resider can steal them for me and make it better.
Well, Jack,
uh,
if you are listening, Jack, mute the speakers, please, for this moment.
no stealing of ideas. Yeah, we've got the list of future episodes is at least, I think, 50 topics long. At least we've got written ideas for at least 50 episodes in the future.
5 years?
I Sorry,
5 years?
not 5 years, 50 episodes. That's
Oh,
about
50 episodes.
2 years, something like that.
Whoa, that's a lot.
But we're gonna probably start sometime in the next month uh, a new a new format of podcast of episodes, uh, kind of in between regular episodes of the show. We would try and create what we would call B-side episodes, which would be more interview based and more technically oriented. We do we do a survey. Each year we do a survey. We ask the listeners what they like in the podcast, what they wish us to do more of, or if they have any comments and criticism. And one of the most common remarks that our listeners gave is they want more technical information. They want to learn interesting technical stuff. And so we decided to create, in between regular episodes, more interview-oriented episodes about more technically heavy stuff. How actual malware works, how the technical ideas are actually implemented. Something which I find very, very interesting, and it's not easy always to add that material to regular episodes, because in regular episodes I need to create a balance between the story and the technical explanations. I can't put too much emphasis on either one of them. So when we'll do the B-sides, we'll try to make them more in-depth technical episodes. It's going to be a challenge. It's not very easy to do that over on audio, because you have to explain stuff and people can't see it. You have to really be very good in explaining ideas in a very kind of abstract way. So it's a great challenge, and I love challenges. That's why I live for.
Yeah, I think I think the idea to make it more technical is amazing. I sometimes listen to podcasts during my traveling to work that I think it's nice that you are talking about cross-site scripting or remote code execution, but I want to know how. How can he do it?
Exactly.
Tell me more about how he did it instead of, we had remote code execution, so the company has been hacked.
And sometimes the technical stuff is the really interesting stuff.
Yeah,
because
exactly.
Human stories, it's fine, it's very interesting, people love to hear it, but there's a beauty in the engineering of stuff. I think that many engineers will understand what I'm talking about. When you see a well-designed system, even if it's a car, a machine, software, if it's very elegant design, the design is very elegant, very efficient, very smart, it's beautiful. It's, for me, reading code which is very elegant, it's like reading poetry. It's very, very beautiful.
It's like reading reading a science fiction book, as you have many.
Exactly. And when I read it, I want to share it with the audience because it's so beautiful. And it's not easy to share it, because when you try to explain it, you need to have, the audience need to have the background, the knowledge of how things really work. It's not, sometimes you don't have the common ground to start to really talk about something. Then you have to create that common ground, both in technical explanations and analogies. So it's a great challenge. But if you can, if you end an episode and the listener sits back and said, wow, I wasn't aware that tool or that malware or that technique could be so beautiful. I mean, when I felt that the last time, that feeling, relatively just a few weeks back, I read an article about how the COVID vaccine really works. I was very curious to know how the COVID-19 vaccine works. It's an mRNA vaccine. It's not a traditional vaccine. I wanted to learn how it works. And I read the articles about how it really works. And when I was done, I was amazed. It was really like reading a science fiction book. And I sat back and I said, wow, we live in amazing times. And when I try to explain why the vaccine is so beautifully designed, it's not an easy thing to do. You have to really know your stuff about DNA and RNA and stuff that I understand, but not a lot of people understand.
I am probably one of those who doesn't understand it quite well. I know DNA, of course, but the other one you mentioned, no, I have no idea. But it's an interesting story, of course, the COVID vaccinations, and we can talk for hours about it. There are many opinions, so let's just skip that before we launch an entire attack against the COVID vaccinations. But yeah,
Exactly.
thank you for the long answer, and yeah, it's a great answer. It's really interesting, and thank you for sharing what is coming up in the next 2 weeks. We can't wait for the B-sides interviews that you guys are planning. Yeah, for my next question, it's not about podcasting, but we are slowly going outside of podcasting. What do you do besides podcasting? So do you do other things, hobbies, gaming, sporting, reading? I can see in the background. Yeah,
Yeah.
other things.
Yeah, I do a lot of things because I'm the kind of person I just can't do one thing. It never worked for me. Even as an engineer, I never was able to concentrate on one specific field. I moved from different, disciplines of engineering, hardware, hardware, software, lots of different topics, and I'm still that kind of guy even today. So, except aside from podcasting, I also write books. I play bass guitar in a rock band.
Oh, nice.
Uh, yeah. Um, I code. I do a lot of side projects on software. Create applications, games for my kids, small projects just for fun. I design websites. I create, sometimes music in electronic software. I do a lot of stuff. Most of them I don't do very well because you master of everything is master of none. I mean, as a bass player, for example, I'm decent. You won't take me for your next big tour in the United States, but you don't have to be very, very good to play bass, to be a great musician. But I love doing lots of stuff because I love the connections. For example, lots of connections between music and mathematics, and I really love mathematics. So when I study music, I enjoy learning about music from the mathematical sides of how different frequencies work together, etc. And when I study, for example, code, software development, I find it very, very similar to writing prose, writing books. There's a lot of commonality in the techniques of writing good drama books and good code. It might surprise some people, but when I'm writing an episode of a podcast, I think I'm working the same parts of my brain that work when I'm writing a software. So I find that knowing lots of different disciplines kind of gives me new angles of understanding of things that I'm really good at. It makes me a better engineer to learn about music and to learn about microbiology and whatever. I try to be very proficient in many, many disciplines. One of my loves in life.
Oh, it's nice that you have so many things that you do, like music, computer programming, code, reading. Yeah, it's nice to have more things than just only one thing to focus. I also play piano, and I'm reading books, going to the gym, volunteer work. So yeah, I get your point about doing more things than just focus on one. It's nice to have
Yeah.
more things to do, and
But
life
sometimes, if to be honest, sometimes it's a
is too much.
disadvantage
Yeah, too much.
because it's too much. You really have to, you have to invest a lot of time, and that means that for example, I don't watch television at all. I haven't seen television for like 15 years now. Every series that everybody's talking about, Game of Thrones, whatever, I've never watched anything, so I have
Game of
to
Thrones.
sacrifice quite a lot. And sometimes, for example, as an engineer, sometimes it was a disadvantages because other engineers were really becoming specialized in one field and being experts in that specific field,
Yeah, they focused
while
only on one thing, on the coding.
exactly they kind of focused on one single thing and dived very deep into it, while I always find it very hard to focus. So I learned lots of stuff, and I was never really an expert on anything. Now it's a bit different because now I'm an expert on podcasting because I've been doing it for so long. I'm now an expert, but sometimes it can be a disadvantage for specific kind of roles and jobs and whatever.
Yeah, I can totally understand what you mean, and yeah, there are advantages and disadvantages, of course, to have too many things on your schedule. But yeah, yeah, I always say life has too much things to do than just one thing.
Yeah,
But yeah, that's my opinion, of course. uh,
exactly. That's me also.
let's go to the follow question. Yeah, I think this question does not really count for you, but yeah, let me just ask it. If you have any, what was your first certification? If you have any certification.
No, I don't have a cybersecurity certification.
No, but
As I said,
perhaps
I'm not a professional in the field,
no, but perhaps
but I
Windows
am
or something, Amazon.
um, not really any specific certification, but I mean I studied electrical engineering in the university. So electrical engineering as a field of study covers a lot of many disciplines, from physics and chemistry to biology and mathematics. You learn a lot from very different disciplines. So I never bothered to create to go after a specific certificate, be it Windows or whatever. I just learned everything. So, for example, as a software developer, I know probably 5, 6, or 7 languages. Java, JavaScript, Python, whatever. But I never took the time to study enough to get a certification in any topic. It's just not me. I don't want to spend the time learning so much about one thing because I get distracted. This is very interesting. But this is very interesting also. I could never do that.
Yeah, there are so many programming languages those days.
Exactly.
There are coming more and more, it seems. But yeah, thank you for answering it.
Exactly.
Yeah, let's go to the final 2 questions. Then we go to the questions of shame, and then I see there are many people have some questions in the chat, so we can go to them too. Yeah. How do you manage your time right now with podcasting, coding, playing music, reading books? You told me that you had children, so how do you spend time with children? Yeah, how do you manage all your time? And of course, sleeping. If you sleep.
Sleeping, I don't do much. So first, as I said, I stopped watching television. You would be amazed of how much time is available to you if you only stop watching television. I mean, most people spend at least an hour a day, I think, in front of television. And when you're thinking about it, an hour a day for 1 year is like 365 hours, which is enough to go to the university and a full semester of learning, maybe even more. So once I stopped watching television, I had lots of free time available. But finding the balance with the family was the big challenge for me, I admit. I did it very poorly in the beginning because I tend to get excited from all this, from new stuff that I'm doing, that at the beginning I found it very difficult to raise my children, and it was only, I think, after 4 or 5 years of starting to podcast and doing it after work, that I realized that it's not a smart way of living. I mean, I stopped, aside from not watching television, I stopped doing sports. I stopped playing music because I didn't have time for everything. And it took me a while to understand that I need to find the right balance. And once I did, I decided that family comes first. So once I now that podcasting is my profession, as I said, I quit engineering and I started my company. I do my podcasting work only during the day, and then I come home and then I'm only with the family. I try not to do anything else. And then when the kids go to sleep, only then do I start doing other stuff, which means I usually only sleep like 5, 6 hours tops every night. But I think the balance, if there's something that I learned the hard way, is that balance is very important, because in the tough times, I felt like I felt too exhausted. I stopped enjoying what I was doing because it took so much away from me, in the emotional level, the psychological level. But the older you get, the wiser you get. And I'm happy that now things are relatively smooth. So I give all the time the family needs, and only when everybody is asleep, I can go and do my stuff. It took me some time.
Well, you need to be lookout that you sleep enough, but further, it sounds
Yeah.
it sounds as a good time management.
If I could, if I could skip sleeping entirely, I would do that in a heartbeat. If there was a pill you could take to avoid sleeping, I would be the first one to try.
I think many people will not sleep,
Exactly.
but yeah, unfortunately, our brains need sleep and our body to restore. So yeah, yeah. No, well, thank you for answering this question. Let's go to the last question. Do you have any advice or tips for the people who are watching right now and they want to join the InfoSec field? Like a hacker
Uh,
or blue teaming or podcaster, perhaps? I don't know.
yeah, I mean, if somebody wants to join to learn cybersecurity from the technical side, I very much encourage them because I think it's a beautiful discipline of engineering. One of the most beautiful, even because it's ever changing. The nature of cybersecurity is such that it's a game of minds. It's the attackers versus the defenders. And I mean, I've been involved in cybersecurity for, I think, almost 12 years now. And every year there's something new technique, new ideas, new tools, new ways of thinking. And it's not something to be taken lightly, because in other fields of engineering, progress, even though progress is always occurring in engineering, it can be slower. So you could go for years without actually learning anything new and changing your way of thinking. But cybersecurity is always a challenge. You can't really stay in one place. You have to run just to stay, in one spot. So from technical aspect, cybersecurity is amazing. It's just an amazing field. And of course, if anybody wants to be a podcaster, that's something else, because unfortunately, there's not a lot of money in podcasting. It's art. It's like every form of art. It's not something that you can really make a living from. Fortunately for me, as a production company, I create some shows which are, I do it as work, but I'm not passionate about the topics. And then that allows me to use my time to do stuff that I really, really enjoy. So I can have that balance. But many people when they're doing arts and they are in every which kind of art, something, whether it be music, whether it be sculpting, painting, whatever, they find that they have to compromise and do commercial stuff that they don't enjoy. So if somebody is not that kind of person who can enjoy doing art commercially, podcasting is probably not for you. You have to be pragmatic. You have to work for sometimes purely for money, purely for to have budget, and just spend 20% of your time on really making the art that you enjoy. So if somebody has that orientation, that state of mind, that's fantastic. If not everybody can be podcasters. Be something less, like a president, head of government, judge.
Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Exactly.
Well, thank you for answering that question. Yeah, let's go to the questions of shame, and then we will answer the questions from the people. So, for the first one, which hero will you be? You can choose any hero, science fiction, celebrities. Now, you read science fiction books a lot, I see, so you probably can think of some science fiction hero.
Wow, that's a difficult question. I have so many.
Darth Vader.
Yeah, most of the heroes that I really identify with in science fiction stories are the technical heroes, the engineering heroes, the mathematicians, the people who come up with great ideas, not the courageous heroes who can fire a gun or whatever. That's not me. I'm a coward. I would be the first one to run. But for example, Larry Niven. Larry Niven is an American science fiction author, and many of his books, the heroes of the books, are people who are proficient in engineering, because he's also a mathematician. It's what's known as hard science fiction. It's very technical. So I find myself sometimes reading his books and saying, "Wow, I would love to be that guy." to be in the machinery section of that spaceship, working on the machines. I don't care that other people will fly the ship and do the maneuvers and stuff. They do their things. I want to be behind the scenes.
I see someone is.
I'm a bass player in a rock band, because bass players, they are kind of the second row, and they are in charge of making music fun, but they are not the solo guitarists and the singers who get the spotlight. I'm the technician behind the scenes when I'm playing a bass guitar.
I see someone in the chat saying Dr. Octopus. You want to be Dr. Octopus, it's the hero. At least you have 8 arms, so you can do everything.
That's a great idea.
You can play piano, learning code, everything at the same time. Time management is really great then, with 8 arms.
Exactly.
Let's go to the second question. If you can choose 2 parents, which 2 parents would it be? It can be celebrities, science fiction people, again, yeah. Whatever you want. Yeah, parents.
Interesting. Great questions. Great questions. Let's see. I would probably like Isaac Asimov to be my father.
Interesting.
Partly because my real father, my biological father, is a bit like that. Isaac Asimov was an author, a very famous science fiction author, who really comes from the scientific discipline. He not many people know, but he wrote many more non-fiction science writing than science fiction books. And I have a feeling that having someone with his breadth of intellect and so many stuff that he learned over time, if I could sit with this guy, the conversations would probably be so interesting. That's one. And the second parent, I mean, nowadays I can even choose another male parent. That's also,
Yeah, of course.
I can also do that. But you know what? Just to be fair, I'll try to think of a female role model. Very
Sure.
interesting question. You
Wonder
know what?
Woman.
I'll think about it and I'll come back to that question a bit later. I need to think about it.
You can always choose Georgia Whiteman, hacker lady, or Wonder Woman.
Yeah, Wonder Woman, that's great. She's even Israeli, so it even fits.
Yeah. You see, you have your mother.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for answering the question. Let's go to the third one. What will be your weapon of choice? It can be a science fiction weapon or a real weapon. What will be your weapon of choice? Shooting books or something?
That could be very painful.
Free
Weapon
books.
of choice. I would choose malware. I would definitely choose malware.
You can throw the worm against the creator.
Yeah, I
Like here you have it, boom.
Exactly. If I had to engage, in some kind of a fight with an enemy, it would probably be, some kind of a technological enemy. It would have either a boat or airplane or whatever. And over time, what we learned, everybody in cybersecurity, is that these machines are so vulnerable
Yeah.
that you don't really need a bullet to hit them. You just 1, 2, 3 lines of codes,
A shell.
elegant, in the right place, in the right time, that entire machine is yours. So I would probably be, if I was fighting a war, I would probably be behind a computer trying to manipulate the enemy's technology in my favor.
It sounds as a fair weapon. Yeah. Let's go to the follow-up question. In a game of scissor, paper, and rock, what will be your first choice?
Paper.
So finally, nobody has chosen paper as before, I think. So you are one of a kind.
I'm an author. I'm a book guy. I love papers. I
Yeah,
love paper.
it sounds fair. Let's go to the last question. What will be your ultimate hacker name? You are the first person who can register a hacker name on Earth, so every option is available. What will it be?
Whoa, that's a good one. Well, it's gonna be obscure. Not a lot of people would know that, but the name would be Haichi Papa.
Haichi
And
Papa.
Haichi Papa has no meaning, I think, outside of Israel, because it's a name taken from a song of an Israeli band back in the 70s, which as a kid, I loved that song very much. And the name Haichi Papa kind of stuck. So sometimes when I play video games, I love video games as well. I mean, I'm a nerd. So I don't want, if I use my real name, Ran Levi, there will usually be at least 1 or 2 people who know me. So they would start chatting with me about the podcasts. So I use the name Haichi Papa so that
Haichi
they
Papa.
don't know who I am, just to let me play in peace. So if you see an Aichi Papa in some multiplayer game, I don't know, Fortnite or whatever,
Or Fortnite.
that's probably me. And that would be my hacker name as well. Aichi Papa was here.
Achi Papa as Hackett Papa.
Exactly.
Well, let's go to the questions of the people. Yes, let me see who has questions. I am checking. Here, the first one. What's your thought on the whole SolarWind hacking scenario?
Yeah, a very interesting incident. I read a lot about it because it's very interesting. And I think it kind of points a finger at a very, very big problem we have now in technology in general, which is lots of hidden ties and hidden channels of information between a lot of actors, a lot of companies, organizations, government entities. I wasn't aware, and I think lots of people weren't aware, that one company, such as SolarWinds, could have ties and access to, we're talking about more than 15,000 different organizations in the United States, probably even more. So when you learn about that hack and how it was managed to be so effective, I mean, hacking thousands of organizations by just hacking their one single supplier, that is something that we need to think about. I mean, we can also watch it from think about it from the biological side, the evolutionary side. As I said before, I'm very interested in cross discipline ideas. And you see that in biological populations, when there is homogeneity between the organisms, everybody is the same, they are very vulnerable to natural attacks, like a virus or a bacteria that attacks the entire population. That's very dangerous in biology. That's why we evolved with techniques like sexual reproduction and these kinds of evolutionary techniques to inject heterogeneity into the population. And we don't have these kinds of mechanisms in cybersecurity currently. Nothing stops an organization from using the exact same supplier as another 15,000 organizations, which is wrong, which is definitely wrong. We need more operating systems. We need more, software, different software tools, and we need to think clearly and from a high level about what should be common in technology, like standards. Standards are very important. They should be common to everything, but the implementations, they need to be somehow different, because if not, then one worm, one computer virus, one type of malware can cause an enormous damage all over the world, which is very troubling. I mean, for me, somebody who read and researched thousands of attacks, SolarWinds is, I think, one of the biggest single origin attack that I've ever read about. I hope that it's a kind of a warning and a kind of alarm for the professionals of the field to try and find ways to make software more heterogeneous. It's not easy, but I think it's a must.
Well, thank you for the answer, and I hope that answered his question. It does for me at least. I found the follow-up question that sounds as: what skills will become important for hackers to learn in the next 5 years?
Yeah, it's a very difficult question, because if you think about what skills, if you go back 5 years and you think about what are the kind of skills that people that you would recommend someone 5 years ago, it would probably be very difficult to kind of try to predict what kind of ideas and skills you would need. Technology moves very rapidly. So I think that the number one skill that somebody in the field of cybersecurity needs to learn is how to learn new stuff. And really learning new stuff is a skill by itself. You have, I mean, when I was a student in the academy learning electrical engineering, I didn't know how to learn. So I wasted so many hours of my time learning stuff which now I know the techniques that fit me and my way of thinking and understanding. You know, when you're 45 years old, you get the experience over the years teaches you what you're good at and what are the ways you find better for learning. So I would probably spend a lot of time reading about different techniques of learning, experiment with, you know, learning from video like YouTube versus learning from books versus learning from articles versus learning by teaching versus learning by creating projects. Lots of different ways of learning. And most of us have just one or two ways that fit the way our brains are, you know, connected. So learn how to learn, because you'll have to learn every single year. Every week we will have something new to learn. And I would probably invest a lot of time in learning the really basic stuff of technology. I'm talking about how actual CPUs and memory systems work together. The actual way that computers work, not on a high level, you know, top high level languages. Okay, you know Python, so what? You know Python, and then you have to learn in a few years, you have to learn a new language because it comes along. You have to really understand how packets go over the net, for example, and how computers process code in the deepest level in order to transfer the knowledge that you learned, for example, by learning Python and moving to a different language. That's luckily for me, I come from the hardware side. I was a hardware engineer, and for 15 years, I built computers. I actually built motherboards and computers mostly for military purposes, but nevertheless, I was working I actually worked with the resistors and capacitors, you know, the real tiny stuff. And nowadays, when I learn new ideas, I very fast I can get the gist of the idea because I know the very lowest levels. And that is something that I think lots of engineers and developers struggle with. For example, when I was a hardware engineer, I worked with software developers. Many of them were very afraid of crossing the imaginary line between software and hardware, of figuring out what their software was really doing inside the hardware. What is a register? What is, you know, a memory channel? What is a clock? It's something that many developers don't really understand. Once you understand these basic ideas, it becomes very easy to learn new ideas down the line, because these basic ideas, they never change. I mean, computers in the 50s basically work the same as modern computers. Of course, technology has evolved and it's much smaller and faster, whatever. But memory was a memory even when it was, you know, big drums of memories of 1 kilobyte in the size of a truck. It's the same ideas, it's just smaller. So learn how to learn the basics.
Well, thank you for that answer. Let's go to the follow question. Yes. How to start coding as a beginner?
Yeah, actually, that's something that was very hard for me, because and the first time I really encountered code was as a student, and in the university which I learned at, they didn't teach it very good. They taught us C language, which is a very difficult language for beginners, and they taught us computer science ideas like how to sort and how to do recursive algorithms, etc., which is very difficult and not very practical for many developers. Many developers will never write C code in their life because it's not very practical nowadays. So I really hated coding. I really hated coding until I was about 33 years old, when I had some downtime in my project as an engineer, and I had like 3 or 4 days to do nothing. So I said to myself, you know what? Everybody is talking about this new language. It wasn't really new by then, but it was new to me, about Python. What's Python? So I said to me, you hate it, but you have to learn a bit just to be able to talk to the software developers in my department and to understand what they're talking about. And I found that first, choosing the easiest language is important. You have almost hundreds, thousands of languages to choose from. Go to the easier ones, even if it's not very practical. Even if you won't use Python is easy. Learn Python. Once you get the ideas of Python, it's always the same in whatever language you learn. So once you learn Python, it takes you nothing to learn a new language. So go easy in terms of what the language you choose. And then do small projects that you have a purpose for, which is a kind of difficult because not always you have great ideas of what you want. For me, for example, my daughter was, at the time, she was only 3 or 4 years old. And I said to myself, okay, she's a small kid. Maybe I'll write a simple game which is specifically for her. She already knew what computers were. She knew what computer games, basic computer games were. But I wrote a computer program in Python that says her name when she succeeds. She does something and then it says her name is Noga. So it says, hey Noga, good work, whatever. I think it was cute because it was personal. Not many computer games were personal.
Now she's scared of computers because she always thinks, oh no, he knows my name. Oh, he knows my name. Oh no, help.
I didn't think about it. Now that you're mentioning it. So yeah, choose a very easy language to start with. Even, basic stuff like HTML, which is easy. JavaScript is relatively easy as well. Go for the basics and find the project that you really care about for some reason. You have a small problem that you want to solve, or something that you want to do for others that will give you a reason to work on it. Because if not, it can be very boring, and we don't want to be bored. That's my tips, personal tips.
Well, thank you for answering that question. And I hope that answered his question. I see 2 more questions. So, yeah, we have 2 more questions to go. The next one is, do you have any plans talking with Barrett Brown or Jeremy Hammond?
Jeremy Hammond? I know the name. Is that?
It doesn't say anything to me, so I can't help you with it.
Just a second. Which question was it in the chat? Let's see.
Jeremy Hammond and Barrett Brown.
Let's see. I don't see that specific. I see Barrett Brown and Jeremy Hammond. Frequency. That's the name of our chat guy. So maybe I just forget who the names are, but I don't know these names yet. So remind me.
So here's this.
Hacker convicted for about 17 years, a renowned former member of DEF CON. Haven't heard the name.
Me,
but
me
it sounds
neither. But
interesting, so maybe I will. That's an idea.
yeah, I also never heard of those guys. But yeah, it sounds interesting.
But Frequency, why are you giving ideas for Jack Resider? he'll,
Yeah.
he'll do a better episode.
Delete those messages right now. Delete them before they.
Let's keep it quiet. We don't want Jack to hear us.
I will ask Jack the same question so you can steal his ideas back. Well, yeah, there's no answer, sorry, but yeah, at least you gave him an ID, so perhaps in the future he will talk to them.
Exactly.
For the next question, if you had to recommend one book, which book will it be?
Lots of so many books that I could recommend. I think Yuval Noah Harari is a rather famous Israeli author who in the past 3 or 4 years have written several books which are I would say history books, but they are not really historical books because he kind of uses history to give us, insights about how humans evolved and think. And his books are so thought-provoking. I mean, I'm not, of course, the only one to say that. I mean, even Barack Obama recommended his books a few years back, and he's very well known around the world now. His books are very, very thought-provoking. There isn't an occasion where, when I finish an episode in one of his books, and I'm not walking away with so many thoughts and ideas in my head. And I know some people really change the way they think. So go check out Yuval Noah Harari's books. Excellent author, very thought-provoking ideas and conclusions from history.
Oh, thank you for answering that question. And yeah, all questions have been answered. So yeah, I think we are at the end of the stream. We are already 1 hour and 30 minutes further. It's going fast time. Yeah, well, thank you for being here and thank you for taking your time to talk with me. And I hope you enjoyed the questions. I hope you enjoyed the questions from the people and the questions of shame. And yeah, I hope
Thank you very much. It was great pleasure. Great questions. Very much enjoyed it. I hope the audience also enjoyed it, and I hope I gave you great ideas and great recommendations. And of course, feel free always to everybody in the chat or whatever. I'm always available via Twitter. It's at Ran Levi, RANLEVI. Always happy to get your comments and ideas for future episodes, and keep learning new stuff, people. We live only once, and we have to spend that time wisely. Thank you very much.
Yeah, well, thank you for the ideas again, and yeah, thank you again for being here. And I hope the people who are watching, you all enjoyed it. I hope, and yeah, I see it is day at your place right now. So yeah, I wish you a nice day, of course. Further, I don't know what's on your agenda, but yeah, have fun doing it anyway, and have a nice weekend. Further, and
thank you very much. Great pleasure.
Yeah, and for those who are watching, yeah, you guys, of course, too. Have a nice weekend, and yeah, I see you all probably the next time. So see you all, everyone.